The coldest, most distant treatment you receive from an avoidant is actually proof that you matter to them more than anyone else ever has. Their icy behavior isn't indifference. It's their desperate attempt to create emotional anesthesia strong enough to numb the overwhelming feelings they have for you. The more significant you are to them, the colder they become, because warmth would mean facing just how much you mean to them, and that truth feels too dangerous to acknowledge. Coldness is their defense against overwhelming love. When avoidants encounter someone they truly can't forget, their love for that person becomes so intense it threatens their entire psychological defense system. The coldness they display is proportional to the warmth they actually feel. They're essentially using emotional ice to prevent their heart from catching fire in ways they can't control. This isn't calculated manipulation or strategic emotional withholding. It's an automatic trauma response that kicks in when they recognize they're dealing with someone who could completely transform their emotional landscape. The colder they act, the more terrified they are of how much they actually care. Their psychology interprets unforgettable love as the ultimate threat to their survival. So they deploy maximum emotional distance to protect themselves from feelings so powerful they could dismantle every wall they've spent decades building. They punish you for making them feel. The coldness is often their way of punishing you for awakening feelings in them they thought they'd successfully buried forever. You forced them out of emotional numbness into painful aliveness, and they resent you for making them feel vulnerable, hopeful, and terrifyingly open to being hurt. This punishment isn't fair or conscious, but it's their psychological way of trying to make you responsible for the emotional chaos you've created in their carefully controlled inner world. They want to hurt you for hurting them with the gift of genuine love. The irony is that they're punishing you for being exactly what they've always wanted, but never believed they could have. Their coldness toward you is evidence that you've succeeded in touching parts of them they thought were permanently closed off. Cold treatment protects them from hope. Being warm with someone they can't forget would require them to hope for a future they don't believe they deserve or could sustain. Coldness protects them from the dangerous possibility that love might actually work out this time, that vulnerability might be safe, and that they might be worthy of the connection they desperately crave. Hope feels more dangerous than despair, because hope requires them to risk everything they've built to protect themselves. Staying cold means staying safe from the possibility of disappointment so devastating it could destroy their ability to function entirely. They'd rather guarantee their own suffering through coldness than risk the hope that warmth would require, because hope means they might have something to lose, and loss feels more threatening than never having anything at all. They're testing whether you'll stay despite their worst. The coldest treatment is often their unconscious test of whether you love them enough to see through their defensive behavior to the terrified person underneath. They're showing you their absolute worst to see if you'll abandon them like they expect everyone eventually will. This testing isn't manipulative strategy. It's trauma-based behavior designed to confirm their worst fears about their own lovability. They act cold to force you to prove whether your love is conditional or strong enough to survive their defensive patterns. The tragedy is that they want you to pass their test by staying, but they make the test so difficult that most people fail by leaving, which confirms their belief that they're unworthy of lasting love. Coldness maintains the illusion of control. When they act cold towards someone they can't forget, they maintain the illusion that they're choosing emotional distance, rather than being overwhelmed by feelings they can't manage. The coldness lets them pretend they're in control, when actually they're drowning in emotions they don't know how to process. This false sense of control through coldness protects their ego from admitting how powerless they feel around someone who matters so much. They'd rather appear cruel than reveal how completely vulnerable they are to your moods, responses, and presence in their life. The coldness allows them to maintain their identity as someone who doesn't need anyone, while secretly organizing their entire emotional existence around someone they can't stop thinking about. They're grieving what they can't have. Much of their coldness stems from preemptive grief for the relationship they believe they'll never be able to sustain with someone so important to them. They're mourning the loss of something beautiful before they even try to build it, because they're convinced they'll destroy it through their own limitations. This anticipatory grief manifests as coldness because warmth would require them to hope for something they've already convinced themselves is impossible. They treat you coldly because they're already saying goodbye to what could have been. The emotional distance protects them from fully experiencing the pain of loving someone they believe they can't keep, whether due to their own dysfunction, your eventual realization that you deserve better, or circumstances beyond their control. Coldness covers their obsession. Behind every cold interaction with someone they can't forget is someone who thinks about that person constantly, analyzes every conversation for hidden meanings, and organizes their entire emotional world around someone they're pretending not to care about. The coldness is their attempt to hide the fact that you occupy more mental and emotional space than anyone else in their life. They act indifferent to cover up their complete psychological preoccupation with your moods, responses, and feelings toward them. This obsessive thinking combined with cold behavior creates internal torture where they're constantly focused on someone they're forcing themselves to treat poorly. The contradiction between their internal focus and external coldness creates psychological suffering that only increases their defensive behavior. They know you could save them. The coldest treatment is reserved for people they recognize could actually heal their wounds and transform their capacity for love. This potential for salvation terrifies them so much that they deploy maximum emotional distance to prevent the vulnerability that healing would require. They act cold because they know instinctively that warmth with you would lead to transformation they're not sure they're brave enough to undergo. You represent their chance at emotional evolution, and that possibility feels more threatening than staying stuck in familiar dysfunction. Their coldness toward you isn't evidence that you don't matter. It's proof that you matter so much they can't handle the feelings you create, without emotional anesthesia strong enough to numb their overwhelming love.